May I now request Dr. Sanjeev Ranjan to set the ball rolling. Thank you. Back is this. Okay, thank you. Admiral Lamba, Admiral Karamveer Singh, Admiral Ashok Kumarji, Admiral Chauhan, distinguished panelists, and esteemed delegates. I'd like to thank the Maritime Foundation for inviting me for this, because this is a topic which all of us in the ministry we are working on, and it's a combined effort of multiple stakeholders that anything like this can really take off and happen in the kind of scale and measure that we want. As far as the maritime connectivity and trade is concerned, India has been involved with it for ages. And the first slide which I have essentially depicts the kind of tradition that we've had running to more than 5,000 years now. The Lothal dry dock that you get to see, which we are trying to recreate at Lothal by way of the National Maritime Heritage Complex, there was trade which used to happen with Mesopotamia and the Middle East, which is more than with 2000 years BC. We had these ports of Tamrilipti, Mahabalipuram, et cetera, which used to trade all over the Southeast Asia, Indochina, Malaysia. The Mauryan period, which was about 300 BC again, they had links with Southeast Asia and other parts of the world through the Indian Ocean region. And it is through those linkages, trade linkages, that we had Buddhism and other religions from India spreading to these countries. So the IOR as a matter of maritime connectivity and trade has been there for India for ages. The Kalinga kingdom, which was on the coast of Orissa, again, you find similarities between the culture there with the Southeast Asian countries because of trade linkages which were there at that point of time. And you still have this Bali Yatra, which is going to happen on the 30th of November, where you have the local people who go out to the Paradip port, today's Paradip port, and set out small boats, because this is a time when the monsoon winds are idle, and that's the time the sailors 2,000 years back used to take this route to go to places like Indonesia and Bali, which we still know of, and these are traditions running back to 2,000 years. So Indian Ocean was very much the backyard in which we have been operating, and the world acknowledged it. You have this book called The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a Greek sailor who have penned it down, and quite a few ports on our coast are listed there, which is a 1st century AD creation. The Chola Empire, we know, in south had connections with Indonesia, the Srivijaya Empire, the Angkor Wat creations that we have. This again talks of the links that we had through the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean to places all over the place. Coming to a more recent kind of a time period, the Marathas had their own navy. We have the Swandurg, the Kolaba port, and the Vijayadurg, which some of our navy friends would still be holding on to, was done during the Maratha period. The shipbuilding acumen that we had supported the kind of maritime tradition that we had in India. But 17th, 18th, 19th century, the domain was taken over by the steam ships. The British Empire at that point of time had control over the entire periphery from South Africa till Malaysia. And it is at that time, because of the various things which happened in the 16th, 17th, 18th century by way of the British legislation. You had, for example, the Calico Act, which came in around 1700 in UK, which banned export of textiles from Bengal, which was the leader at that point of time, to UK. As a consequence, the trade suffered, the shipping suffered. You had navigation acts which came in at various points of time in UK to ensure that it is only the British ships which would carry cargo. And what was allowed was only raw material from India and finished goods from UK to all over the world. And this applied not just to India, but to various other dominion and other places where they had their foothold. So it is those things around that point of time resulted in our own maritime kind of a domain knowledge that we had was somewhat dissipated, but the tradition remained. But what happened at that time was, because the British dominion was all around the Indian Ocean, all around the Bay of Bengal, so there was seamless movement of trade under the British patronage. You had indentured labor going from India to Malaysia, you had movements of all kinds, and therefore the Indian Ocean remained, and the Bay of Bengal remained a vital artery for trade even at that point of time. So it's always been there. Now in the new context, India, United Kingdom were there, post-World War II, it's United States, other players have come in. Now we talk of China and other countries having an interest in the region. The other littoral nations are always there. And with the law of the seas, the littoral nations and the island nations, with their EEZ areas, have become important in the kind of policies that we design for making the entire thing go forward. Now when we talk of the Indo-Pacific region, this is what has become important because it touches on 3 of the largest economies, 60% of the world GDP, and 9 of the 10 busiest ports are in this world. 9 of the 10 most busiest ports of the world are in this region. While we talk of Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean region, which is the one which we are more interested in, 80% of the world's maritime oil, which is more than $10 billion tons of oil, passes through channels in the Indian Ocean. Half of world's container ships, 1/3 of the bulk cargo traffic, 2/3 of the world oil shipments, they converge through the waters south of us through the Indian Ocean. So that is the importance of Indian Ocean as far as the world maritime traffic and trade is concerned. Now with this increasing importance of the Indian Ocean region and the Indo-Pacific, the countries all over the world have had policies tailor-made in the last few years to ensure that their interests are taken care of. We in India itself had the India's Vision for Indo-Pacific released by the Honorable Prime Minister in 2018 at the Shangri-La Dialogue. This was followed by the Indian Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative in 2019, where the kind of activities and steps that we are working on have been initiated. The major declaration at the United Nations Security Council of responsible maritime connectivity in 2021 is another thing, I think, which every country of the world has to be looking at to be able to, while designing their policies in the region. And that is going to be important in calibrating the kind of policies that we design and take. And there, India, fortunately, has one of the larger areas. The fishing interest, the law of the seas, and the mineral deposits, and the countries which come to have sovereign right over that is also something that we got to be looking at. Today, if you look at the overall trade in the Indian Ocean region, India has the maximum trade volume, as you can see from the slide here. Our trade volume is $800 billion plus, which is the largest. The second is Singapore, followed by Malaysia, Australia, and so on. So in terms of trade volume in the Indian Ocean region, we are the country, we have the largest trade volume. But if you look at the trade overall, which takes place in the area, China leads, followed by United States, Japan, and then India. India and the other countries around the Indian Ocean, you'll find, don't figure at the top. That is because the trade within the intra-regional trade in the Indian Ocean amongst our own countries is far less. It's just about 6%. The BIMSTEC region is even less. It's just 3%. And that's a big challenge that we got to be looking at. If we really want the trade and connectivity to be working for the larger good of the countries in the region, it is important that, like other countries of the world, other groups have done, The EU, the intra-regional trade is 11%, the ASEAN, it goes up to 20%, and so on and so forth. It is this aspect of the trade that happens through Bay of Bengal, through the Indian Ocean region, we got to be looking at and making sure that we are able to use this potential of Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal to the maximum good of our people. In that direction, the ministry has had a whole lot of initiatives, which I listed at the bottom of the slide here. The trade doesn't happen because of the systems are not harmonized amongst our countries. There are other challenges in terms of infrastructure, which we're trying to make up to the PM Gati Shakti. The logistics policy talks of harmonizing the regulatory regime, the customs challenges. The Act-Is policy has been around for some time, and thanks to all these initiatives, we have been able to make headway in quite a few of the things that were listed out. And I just listed out a few items on which we got to be acting more aggressively for the whole thing to really take off. The concept of Sagar was another thing which was announced by the Honorable Prime Minister. Security and growth for all in the region. Our minister earlier in his speech has already given you a full bird's eye view of the kind of initiatives which have been taken under the overall direction of the Prime Minister, where under the Sagar initiatives, the non-tariff barriers which hold the intra-regional trade to take place, we have improved substantially on the logistics index, thanks to all those coordinated efforts of the various agencies. The major trade facilitation issues have been resolved. Digitizing the entire supply chain is another important thing that we have been working on. Improving the capacity of our ports, the infrastructure, and thanks to Sagarmala and the programs like that. Sagarmala has been around since 2015. It was an integrated program where we funded major ports modernization, digitization. As a consequence of that, the capacity at our ports, as you see, has more or less doubled in the last 8 to 10 years. And we have enough capacity to be able to handle the kind of volumes which we handle now. Our ports, it's about 60% of the capacity that gets utilized now. It doesn't mean that we are complacent with this achievement. The challenge is to keep modernizing it, to make our ports smarter, to make sure that the logistics become more competitive, for which promotion of coastal and waterways is something on which, again, we have made substantial progress. And it is things like the PM Gati Shakti Master Plan and the infrastructure connectivity initiatives that are going to be helpful. As was mentioned, we have the Vision 2030, which has already been around for the last 3 years now. Thanks to that, whether it's getting the world-class ports, smart ports, reducing logistic cost, waterways development, the action on various initiatives is already on. The big thing which I want to mention here is that thanks to Sagarmala and the public-private partnership, we came out with a new model concession agreement for our major ports and other developments at our ports, which was more investor-friendly, more business-friendly. As a consequence, our terminals and the new ports which are coming up are being done fully in the private sector, through private sector funding. So the kind of challenge we had in terms of the resource crunch and the government being forced to put in money on the table, and therefore the limitations that came along with it, we have been able to get over that. And you have a whole pipeline of projects which are going to the market every month, and there is private sector which is lapping it up. The Honorable Minister mentioned about the Tuna Tekra container terminal, which has just been, the foundation stone of which was laid in the Global Maritime India Summit. And that is going to be integrally linked to the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, the starting point. It's going to be a full-fledged terminal which will cater to the needs of the entire North India. The entire cost of 5,000 crore plus is going to be funded totally by the private sector, which would get us a smart, world-class port. And the port authority by itself would get more money out of it so that they can do more development in that region. The Vadhavan port is something which is again coming up in Maharashtra. So the model that we adopted for development of infrastructure at our ports, we have succeeded because of continuous iteration in the concession agreement that we've had, and been able to enthuse the private sector and the private capital to come in the big way. And there's a big lesson for countries in the region who have burned their fingers by exposing themselves to sovereign kind of debt and now have problems of being able to repay those debts. And therefore, the kind of lessons that we've learned here through experience are things which could be globally adopted, at least for the countries around, the other littoral states that I showed in the table earlier. If they adopt that kind of a model, and we have expertise built in the country where our operators can go out, finance operate those terminals so that we're able to have a link all across the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean region, and we come to have a robust supply chain. While we talk of infrastructure, digitization is something which is big. Again, we have a whole lot of initiatives. I have the presentation here, which I request the organizers to kindly share with the audience. I'm going to be running out of time, so I'll quickly run through all this. The digitization of the port operations, the ports of the future are going to be fully digital, and the vessels are going to be autonomous. So the digitization plays an important role. The time taken for clearance of vessels at the port in terms of the paperwork to be done, the customs clearance to be done, the immigration to be done, etc., if done on paper, that runs into days. And if you make it paperless, seamless, it can be done in hours. We've succeeded in doing it. JNPT today has got a turnaround time of less than 20 hours. That's happened quite a bit because of the digitization of various initiatives. What has happened needs to be replicated by other ports, and the kind of reporting systems that we have needs to be harmonized with ports across the world, for vessels across the world, for which IMO has this thing called the Maritime Single Window, which is supposed to be operational from 1st of January 2024. And therefore, countries in the region, in the IOR region, in the Bay of Bengal region, adopt that, harmonize our operating systems so that vessels, when they reach your port, we are able to get the clearances done quickly, is something all of us which we need to be jointly working on. UNICITRAL, again, a body which is trying to make the bills of lading, which is the most important document as far as shipping is concerned, paperless. Now, again, these are things on which the whole world community has to work together. And this is something in which everyone's involvement is important. So the NLP Marine, which for our ports has already been up and operational. The connectivity in our immediate neighborhood is something which we have fortunately been able to succeed, thanks to the cooperation we got from our friends from Bangladesh. Now the protocol route, the volume of traffic has gone up at least 3 times in the last 5 years. And quite a few of the stretches which were otherwise not very operational are now becoming fully operational. Now you have a vessel, for example, you had the cruise vessel which ran all the way from Varanasi all the way to Dibrugarh in the northeast. Now there are shorter options possible of running from Dhulian into Aricha and then to the northeast. So that addendum has been signed. Hopefully we should be able to make it operational. The Sitwe port, the Paletwa connection, the Chittagong access are things on which substantial progress have been made. If we are able to make them up and operational, the intra-regional trade gap that exists, we should be able to overcome that. The groundwork has been laid. The countries, the leadership at the top level are very keen that we push it forward. It is for people like us in this room who should be able to get the nuts and bolts together so that these agreements that we have worked on and got through in the last few years become fully operational for the larger good and the volumes pick up. Similarly, for other than Bangladesh, Bhutan as well, we have the Jogi Gofa terminal coming up west of Guwahati, where the things from Bhutan can come down to Brahmaputra and then on the way to whatever part of the world that they want to send it to. Similarly is the initiative with Nepal, where from Raxaul, things can go to Kalughat and through the Ganges go to any part of the world. So this intra-regional kind of a grid is something which we've been working on with the groundwork which has already been done by way of the Jalma Vikas program, where the Ganges and the Brahmaputra are fully navigable. We should be able to build on these structures. While we have the connectivity part in the region going, there are huge opportunities for things like thank you. Cruise and other things, again, some kind of a start has been made, and these are kind of potential opportunities. We recently had the Global Maritime India Summit in Mumbai, and we had a lot of private sector interest in things like cruise and so on, because of the foundational work which has been done in terms of creation of infrastructure. So the private sector to take off and do big. In terms of taking these initiatives forward where multiple countries are involved, there are already a lot of forums which are there. In terms of SASEC, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, etc., etc. They have been at it, but I think we got to pick up corridor by corridor, have an institutional arrangement to be able to solve the problems for that corridor end to end. And that is the way these corridors can become operational, be it the North-South corridor, be it the new IMEC corridor that we talked of. Fortunately, BIMSTEC is a platform which, again, is supposed to take these things forward. We have the BIMSTEC agreement on maritime transport, which all the countries have agreed on. Under that umbrella, maybe some of these things could be pushed forward. Now, as we go forward, Galathea Bay is a big initiative that is now taking off the board. Galathea Bay being the southernmost point on the Andaman Sea, and therefore the container volumes have to go up. The transshipment of these containers at times end up traveling long distance. It goes all the way from India to Singapore or to Dubai and then transshipped and goes somewhere else. There is no reason why it should not be done closer on our shore. So Galathea Bay, Vijingam are two facilities being created. And again, to make it operational, it's a combined effort of the shipping lines, the ports, and the countries around. Hopefully, we should be able to get it operational. And an institutionalized coordination mechanism, which I thought of. The corridors in the world which have worked, the the Mekong corridor, the ASEAN corridors which they have, the European corridors that they have institutional coordination mechanism, so that transportation of a container or anything requires involvement of multiple agencies, and they all work in unison. While these conferences help us to bring the ideas together, to make them grounded is hard work at various levels. And therefore, this mechanism for some of these ports, the Matabari port, which is being developed in Bengal, in the Bay of Bengal, close to Chittagong, is going to be a game changer. The congestions that we have at Chittagong, hopefully with Matabari, we should be able to get connection to the other linkages that we mentioned. So going forward, I think the digitization part is big. Standardization of documents, the maritime single window, the vessels have to go green, the port have to go green is another big area that we got to be working on. The operations have to be sustainable. The financing has to be sustainable. And if you're able to make these things happen, we should be able to ensure that the focus of the world, which was around the Atlantic, move to Indo-Pacific, and we, with our growth that is happening and with the kind of combined effort of all the young energy that we have here, hopefully Indian Ocean region becomes the nodal point where everyone talks about. And with all this happening and with the takeaways from this conference, we should be able to make it do it. Thank you very much.